Hi, friends. Welcome back. I'm Emily,
And I'm Whitney.
and you're listening to Cousins Talk Crime. You're listening to a true crime podcast. Today's episode may include sensitive or triggering topics. These topics may include domestic abuse, child abuse, substance abuse, sexual assault, torture, murder, and suicide. So, I know this will release late, but way after people care about it. But what do you think about this whole Donald Trump getting shot thing? Have you been following it?
Yeah, I think it's terrible because that guy, there was someone that lost his life.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I just think it's crazy. Like you see, it was a hoax or you know what I
There's
mean?
so many conspiracy theories out there saying
Yeah,
that it's an inside job, that it's this, that Donald Trump staged it himself.
right. And I mean, I've seen a lot of posts about that guy that did lose his family and he was like a dad, and everything. And that's just heartbreaking.
And he was like a firefighter, first responder.
Mm-hmm.
And that just,
And then you have where it says people said they saw the shooter before he actually.
see, that's another thing where we talk about police not taking stuff seriously, right? So
Yeah, I
people said
just
that
don't
they
know.
knew about it for an hour, about this guy. Knew about him for an hour. That's what I've heard. That may not be right. I don't think it matters what your political opinion is. I don't want to talk politics, because you never know, and I don't want to upset anybody, but I don't think, no matter what your political affiliation is, we shouldn't wish for someone to die.
No, no, no,
We
no, no, no.
shouldn't. Because did you hear about Jack Black?
Mm-mm.
He got canceled because, the night that it happened, or maybe the day after, just very shortly, someone or him, somebody on his band, they were going to be performing in Bloomington, but they said they were upset that the person missed. They said that with people recording them, all kinds of stuff. So I'm pretty sure their little tour's canceled because they canceled their show in Bloomington. And yeah, people don't have much respect for Jack Black after that. We love Jack Black.
I didn't even know that how and I know in this day and time it is stupid of me, but I really try to just ignore anything I just do. I'm not a big
Mhm.
I if I'm on TikTok and I see anything, I'm like scroll, scroll. I
Yeah.
don't want to know. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I don't want to know the world's getting ready to end and I need to stock up on water, or learn to eat grass.
Yeah.
I'd rather, I guess, when it happens that day, just be in panic like everybody else,
I understand. I
Because I've
understand.
been seeing that too. I'll get on there that with that thing, we were just talking about it. I don't know if we were talking about it while we were recording. I don't know if we were. The airport shutting down because
Oh,
of
yeah.
was it Microsoft security
It
something?
was some kind of cybersecurity company that
They're
Microsoft
saying
uses.
this is the start. This is what we've been warning you about. You're not going to be able to access your money. Like what are we supposed to do? Go to the bank, take everything out, and dig it in the backyard?
I know.
Because what if it goes down? You can't even get your money because the bank's not working. That you know what I'm
Mhm.
or if they can even see in the system what you have.
Well, and I think people freaked out a little bit too much because this was a planned upgrade. It wasn't.
But if you get
It
on
wasn't a
TikTok,
cyber
it was
attack.
a attack from
It wasn't. It was like a planned upgrade, and it just didn't go right, or
right.
something like that. It was not an attack. From what I have learned about it, it wasn't an attack, so people can chill out.
Yeah, and I know my mom is like, you need to get more, you need to know more what's going on. And I probably do because this is bad to admit on a podcast. It was the night of the debate.
Okay.
hands down, I did not even know who were the candidates doing the debate. Like,
Yeah.
until that night when people told me. But I was like, there's a debate. Who's running? You know what I mean? Like, who did we finally pick? And I could not believe it. I was like, we picked those two again? Like, the same 80-year-olds running against each other again? Like, out of everybody? Like, I was like, this is why I don't even follow it. It's bizarre.
It is. It is crazy that a
Like, but I
country.
didn't know. I mean, I remember when it was all going on, there was a list of people that were all, and I was just, I guess, oblivious to the fact. I thought, I don't know, the last I had checked into it, I thought Trump was in trouble and like he couldn't, you know what I mean, even do it. I thought he was getting ready to go to prison. And then I didn't think Biden would do it again because I just feel like you know what I mean, his age and everything, but I don't know. I'm like, this is why I don't follow it.
No, I totally understand. I don't follow it too much,
Yeah.
but I do follow for the dramatic stuff,
Yeah.
like
I
the
try not
drama.
to get too like heated or and like I'm just like what will happen, I guess will happen, you know?
Yeah. But I will admit, no matter what your political affiliation is, you can't deny that picture of Donald Trump with like blood coming down his face with the American flag in the background and doing that. It's like the coolest picture ever.
No, yeah, I saw people like this will be in history books,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? Knowing that it is and it's a cool picture. It's also like comical in ways that like he just got shot at and he's coming out like fist bumping, you know? But I did listen to on TikTok, just saw a clip of his granddaughter, I think, speaking about him, and it was so like wholesome and cute. And I think a lot of people do forget he's a real human being that has like, you know what I mean, people that care and love about him, you know,
Mm-hmm.
even though other people don't, but wishing death on people.
Yeah, that's just no.
I mean,
Let's not do
he
that.
has you know,
Mm-hmm.
people that really care about him and enjoy him, you know. He's a
Mm-hmm.
person. Everyone who runs is, you know, has families and no wishing people, you know, that's just really sad.
It is. Sorry, let's switch topics, okay? So I'm going to Vegas in a couple of days, right?
Yes.
So I decided
A
that
couple days, when do you guys leave?
Monday.
Dang, I thought it was like I don't know what I was thinking. You
Yeah.
guys leave soon.
Yeah. Just like tomorrow's my last day. So I gotta get a bunch of crap done. But
A
anyway,
bunch.
a bunch, yeah. And anyway, so if you know me at all, especially in person, you will know that I'm a very fair person, very white. My skin is transparent, okay? Like it's about as white as you can get. And so we're going to Vegas and it's going to be hot out. It's going to be like 110 degrees outside. So I'm like, I'm going to be walking around in shorts and tank tops, just stuff to stay cool, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't be walking around in transparent skin in Vegas. So I decided to get a spray tan. I'm not someone that can tan because how transparent I am. I just turn red and then I go back to being transparent. So I of course wear sunscreen while I'm out there, but I got a spray tan so that I don't look super white. And like when you get a spray tan, you're supposed to put a crap ton of this barrier cream on your hands. And I did that, I swear. And they still turned out like super bad. So
I think it'll go away.
I hope by the time we go to Vegas, I was scrubbing my hands.
You need to scrub it with what's it called? I forget. There's this stuff that will probably take it off. I'll think of it.
Oh, okay. I was like, I have like a cleaning brush with like hard bristles, and I was like doing that this morning. It didn't feel great, but
There's
it made
like
me feel better.
stuff like auto mechanics use in shops and it's gritty. And it's supposed to take off any like oils and grease from
Oh,
I can't think
I
of
think
the
Corey's
name.
got some of that because he likes to change oil
Yeah,
in
I
the
think you
cars
need
and
to go
whatnot.
out to your garage and
I'll ask him for it. Corey, go get that
no, because
stuff.
that will help.
Okay, good. I will do that because
It might take off the first
they
layer
just
of your
look
skin, but
worth it.
right.
It just, I look dirty.
It'll
I
get
promise
better.
I'm not dirty. They are clean.
I've done that before. I've had it on my feet.
See, my feet look okay. They look decent,
Yeah.
but my hands are not. And even like when I got out of the tanning booth, like I could tell my hands were bad, so I immediately like washed them. Didn't work.
That's
They're
weird.
still looking like this because I was like, it looked so bad, and so I
But I
ran
feel
to the
like if
bathroom.
like a drip of water gets on my arm, I have a line. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like when I
no,
like,
nope, not when you don't want. Like when you
yeah.
don't want it to do it, it's like
Yeah.
really bad. But when you want to scrub it off, it's like no thanks.
Mhm.
I probably didn't stand in the booth the correct way either. Like I don't know. I'm a noob. Anyway, so today I am bringing us a case a little differently than I normally bring to the table. So this is the story about Elizabeth Smart. You may have heard her story before. You may not have heard her story before. If you have heard her story, then you know how this is going to end, but I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. So we're just going to get into it without telling you much further than that. Alrighty, so Elizabeth Ann Smart was born on November 3rd, 1987 in Salt Lake City, Utah. She would be about Matthew's age. So think about where Matthew is. That's where Elizabeth.
It's just a little bit older than me.
Yep. Were you born in 89?
Mhm.
June?
Mhm.
Same year as Taylor Swift?
Yep.
Besties.
Forever.
Forever.
I wish.
Maybe our
In my dreams.
in your wildest dreams. Maybe our podcast will get big enough one day that she'll know who we are.
Oh, I would die.
And you guys could be besties.
Don't get my hopes up.
Guys, we need you to share and like and comment and do everything that you can to boost our podcast so that Taylor Swift could possibly know who Whitney is.
Yeah. That would make my life.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be.
I bet you she's got podcasts that she listens to.
Yes.
Why can't we be one of those?
Right.
Anyway, so her parents were Ed and Lois Smart. Her family was part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and her parents had 6 kids. So Elizabeth was the second oldest, and she had 4 brothers and 1 sister. Now, Elizabeth was known to be very shy and quiet and like a really obedient child. She kind of reminds me of one of my cousin's daughters. She's very quiet and just like that sweet kid that you would never see doing anything wrong. Like you'd never even have to worry about her because you just know. She had a passion for playing the harp. And she began playing the harp at age 5, and she also enjoyed cross-country running and equestrian sports. Now, the harp and equestrian sports makes me think that their family had like a ton of money because that just like seems like rich people hobbies.
Yeah.
But maybe not. So, I don't remember anything ever saying that her parents were like rich or anything. But just in my head, that's what I was like, oh, I bet you they're rich. On June 5th, 2002, okay, a 14-year-old Elizabeth was awoken from her sleep with a man holding a knife against her neck in the bedroom that Elizabeth shared with her younger sister, Mary Catherine. And not only did she share a room with Mary Catherine, she shared a bed with Mary Catherine. So she woke up, a guy had a knife against her neck. Mary Catherine is asleep right next to her. It's wild. They were probably snug on like a full-size bed or a twin-size bed, something like that. So he was whispering in her ear to not alert anyone else in the house, and he threatened to kill her and her entire family if she didn't obey and follow him. Now, since Mary Catherine was in the same bed, she did awake to this happening, but she realized that what was happening was like a scary thing, so she didn't do anything that made him think that she woke up.
Right.
Like whoever was taking Elizabeth didn't realize that Mary Catherine woke up.
She pretended to be
she
asleep.
pretended to be asleep. She kind of poked her eye open a couple times to get a glance at him or whatever. But yeah, he did not realize that she was awake. So she was too afraid to say anything, so she laid pretending to be asleep. She was afraid that if he knew that she was awake, that he would take her as well. Now, once Elizabeth was gone, so Elizabeth complied with him. She said, you know, he said that he was going to kill her whole family. So she said, okay, I'll get up and go with him. Mm-hmm. So she does, without any kind of, no struggle at all. So once she was gone out of the house with him, Mary Catherine woke up their parents and said, hey, this is what happened. And their dad, Ed, called the police immediately. And after calling the police, they called family members. And the family rushed over to help look for Elizabeth. They knew that time was of the essence. Mm-hmm. They knew that the quicker you can find her, the better.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I had mentioned it in our previous episode, there is some kind of study that says 70-75% of people that are going to be killed by their abductor are dead within 3 hours. So, quick. We gotta be quick. When the police and family arrive, the family arriving was kind of dangerous to the situation because they were contaminating the house. This abductor came into the house, walked through the house up into the bedroom. You know, so there's probably fingerprints. There's stuff everywhere. Yeah. And the family comes over and starts touching everything. And they're contaminating the entire crime scene.
That's not good.
No. Now, when evaluating the house, they did find a cut window screen in the window that's in the kitchen, like above the sink. You know how, like, kitchens will have that window above the sink? And unfortunately, by chance, Elizabeth's parents left this specific window open to vent the smell of something that they burnt for dinner the previous night. They usually lock up their entire house, but this night specifically, they had left that window open because they had burnt something and needed to air out the kitchen.
Dang.
It's like, ugh, and it just sucks. And another by chance thing, the family's like alarm system wasn't working. So they have like a home security system that like, if you don't open it up with the password or whatever, there's a whatever. Yeah, that wasn't working that night either.
That stinks.
Or they would have woke them up sooner and potentially found them. Now, Mary Catherine was asked about the intruder because she did get a little bit of a glimpse of him. She described him as a white man around 5'8" with a familiar voice. So it was someone that Mary Catherine has seen before. She couldn't pinpoint who it was, but the voice was familiar. She knew that she had heard that voice before, but she couldn't remember
who it was.
And he was wearing a quote-unquote weird hat. She couldn't explain the hat. It wasn't like a baseball cap. It was just like a weird hat, and she couldn't put her fingers on it. Now, everyone was riddled with questions. Police are having a hard time because they can't pinpoint a motive. He said the Smarts didn't have any enemies. They didn't have a ton of money. They're like, they didn't call for ransom or anything, so they're not thinking this was like a kidnapping for ransom. Right. Nothing like that. So they're having a hard time figuring out a motive. But like, to me in that case, it's just like, well, what if he's just a creep? Like, there are creeps out there that enjoy the company of a young child. Yeah. That's a good enough motive. So the search for Elizabeth went viral. Thousands of people came together to search for her. And out in Salt Lake City, there's mountains everywhere. So there were mountains near her home, and the search efforts extended all throughout the mountains. They were looking for her everywhere out in those mountains. The FBI came in to do a profiling of the suspect, and they suspect the abductor would be sexually motivated and someone that is familiar with the house. Since this was a voice that Mary Catherine recognized, they started suspecting all men who had worked at the Smarts' newly built home. So their house was either newly built or newly renovated, and they had a ton of contractors come in and out of that home. So they're thinking it's one of those contractors because Mary Catherine's recognizing the voice.
Yeah.
So they start questioning all of those contractors. So when they first started their questioning of the contractors, there were 60 plus people, and they're all considered potential suspects. They did eventually narrow that suspect pool down to one man, a man named Richard Reitze. He had worked on the Smart home, and Ed described him as a good worker and very friendly to the girls. So that was always like a little red flag. You're a grown man. Why are you being friendly with the girls?
Right.
Like, just do the work and leave. I don't know. Okay. But whatever. When the police looked into Richard, they found a very long criminal record, including attempted homicide and robbery. He had attempted to kill a police officer when he was caught robbing a place. He served a total 23 and a half years over all of his criminal, things. So 23 and a half years.
Dang.
When he did work at the Smarts home, things did go missing around the house, including a $16,000 bracelet of Elizabeth's mother's. So they say they don't have very much money, but their kid's playing the harp, doing equestrian sports, and she's got a $16,000.
Right. That's
I think
weird.
they've got plenty of, they've got money.
Mm-hmm.
The police were convinced that this was their guy. So they decided to arrest him for a parole violation, and they did this so that he would be kept in custody while they gathered enough evidence they needed to charge him for Elizabeth's abduction. Now, Richard was willing to comply. He offered his DNA. He offered to take a polygraph exam. They found fingerprints at the scene in 2 different places, and those 2 fingerprints matched each other. Not saying that they matched Richard, but they matched each other. So this was the same set of fingerprints in 2 different places that weren't anybody that lived in the houses. However, they did not match Richard's. But, like I said, family came in, contaminated everything.
Yeah.
So police still aren't like, I don't care that those don't match Richard. He's still our guy. Like, he did this. They decided to give him a really rough time in jail, to try to get him to confess. You know, you've heard how people will have people in interrogation rooms forever, and then they end up confessing to something that they didn't do. Well, anyway, they were doing the same kind of thing to him, but over a long period of time. They put him in solitary confinement in jail. They refused him any kind of rec time, warm meals or a warm.
Torturing.
They were torturing the guy.
Yeah.
On a parole violation. He was in jail on a parole violation. At this point, he's still not even in there for abduction or murder. We don't even know that Elizabeth's dead. So, and then there was a time that they made him sit in solitary confinement with a hood over his head. He couldn't even see anything. No sunlight, nothing. What barbaric tactic is this? This is weird.
Yeah.
The police were weird in this case. But the police were so sure it was Richard. There's no way it's not Richard.
Now, at this point, have they asked the sister if she recognizes the voice?
They do. And Mary Catherine says that's not him. That doesn't look like him. That doesn't sound like him. But they're she's, at this point, Mary Catherine might be 10 years old, 9 years old. Can't remember how old she was. But she was young. They don't care. She's a dumb little kid. She doesn't know anything.
I feel like at 9 and 10, your memory's pretty decent then.
I feel like your memory's more sharp than when you're
mine.
an adult.
Yeah.
When you're a kid. Kids remember the weirdest things.
Oh, yeah. Details.
Details, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, they didn't care what she had to say. She was half asleep when it happened. She couldn't be a reliable. Okay, but what evidence do you have?
Right.
Lordy. Now, on July 24th, which is what? Just like a month and a half, almost 2 months after Elizabeth went missing, there was a 911 call that there was another attempted kidnapping. This girl's name was Jessica, and she was Elizabeth's cousin.
That's bizarre.
She's Elizabeth's cousin. That is bizarre. And Jessica was 19 years old, and she woke up to someone cutting the screen in her bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
And she screamed, and the intruder ran away and fled. But people are saying that they don't think that Jessica was the intended victim here. They're thinking it was Jessica's younger sister, Olivia. She was 14 years old, which was the same age that Elizabeth was when she went missing. Apparently, Jessica and her 14-year-old sister, Olivia, had recently switched bedrooms.
Oh, okay.
So they're thinking he meant to actually
Yeah.
go in there and abduct this 14-year-old Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Olivia and Elizabeth were really close. They were cousins, but they were like really close cousins. They probably went to church together, probably did a lot of stuff together. Now, that makes me wonder, is Elizabeth alive?
Yeah.
And or whoever this abductor is, are they trying to get someone so that Elizabeth will have a companion that she knows and loves? I don't know. I think it's very strange.
So you're not thinking it's the guy they have arrested for it?
No. I never think that it's Richard.
Yeah.
They were just no.
Picking someone so they can say they had someone.
Yeah. So now, what do the police say whenever this whole attempted kidnapping happens? Because they've got their guy that did it.
There can't be anyone else out there doing.
They're just like, oh, you know what the police say about this? They say, oh, this is just a copycat. Someone's just trying to like
mimic a kidnapping.
Mimic what happened with Elizabeth. They couldn't possibly be done by the same person because we got this guy in custody.
Right.
We 100% know it was this guy.
That don't make any sense.
But the family was not convinced. They did not accept that. They think that they weren't convinced that it was Richard anyway because they believed Mary Catherine that it wasn't the guy.
Well, that's good that her own family, they knew.
Yeah, they're like, well, Mary Catherine says that's not him, so I don't think that's him. And then especially this other attempted kidnapping happens to someone that's the same age.
Yeah.
It's even her cousin.
Yeah,
like,
so they're thinking
they've got to
off.
be related.
Yeah.
It's got to be related. It's got to be the same person.
Right.
And especially when they're cutting through a screen like they did for Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just...
Same MO, yeah.
But, so, anyway, after a while of smoking him out, I have it written on here as smoking him out, but after a while of practically torturing Richard, trying to get a confession out of him, on August 27th, Richard collapsed. He had a severe condition that required medical help, and he was put into a coma. He ended up passing away on August 30th. So I'm sorry, but is this the responsibility of the police? You know what I mean? Like, did he...
You've been torturing him for a while.
Yeah. They probably weren't paying attention to any kind of, like, medical concerns he had.
What if I didn't care? Because they're like, you're a kidnapper.
I feel like this death is on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, spoiler alert, Richard didn't do this. And he ended up being, his last few months on this earth were him being tortured for something he didn't even do. And police are fucked up. So, as you would imagine, this was a blow to the investigation because they just knew this was their guy. So they're going to get no justice for Elizabeth. They're never going to find where Elizabeth was or like her body or anything because this guy is dead now. They're not going to get any kind of confession out of him. So now a lot of people, like her family, was not convinced that he did it. So they thought this gives hope that the police are going to start looking into other leads
Yeah.
now that this guy is dead.
Right.
So at this point, the case does go kind of cold because, I've said it a million times, the police just knew Richard was their guy. So they didn't have any other interest of like doing anything else. There is a $250,000 reward out there for any information regarding Elizabeth's disappearance, but nothing useful came from that. They have no leads and no living suspects. Now, on October 12th, 4 months after Elizabeth went missing, the case takes a turn for the good. So like we were talking about earlier, little kids just have these weird memories and they remember stuff. It's just weird.
It is.
And someday it may be like 4 months after it happened, say, and they just have an epiphany and remember something. So on that day, one afternoon, Mary Catherine was reading the Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know what it was about this book. They mentioned it in all the articles I read that this is the book she was reading. But something in her brain was triggered and she knew who it was. She immediately knew what the familiar voice was that she heard. She goes to her parents and she says, "I know who took Elizabeth." She told her parents it was a man named Emmanuel. And they seemed really confused at first. They didn't know who she was talking about. Then Mary Catherine jogged their memory. So Emmanuel was a man that they called a quote unquote, this is what I heard from the Crime Junkie podcast. So I don't know if this is something that is stated in a book or if this is their word for it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, but they call him a street creature, which is like a homeless person that bounces around.
I've never heard that term used.
I don't know if that's Ashley Flowers' own personal term from Crime Junkie or if this is something that was stated in like,
right.
I'm pretty sure Elizabeth's uncle has a book. Maybe he states that term.
Maybe he said
I do need to read this book. But so Emmanuel was a street creature. And they had ran into him months before Elizabeth's disappearance. They ran into him and he told them he was homeless and lost his job and he was looking for work. So when he asked for work, Lois was like, our house is being renovated or built, whichever one. We've got all kinds of odd jobs. If you would like to call my husband, maybe we could get you over and you can earn some extra money to do some work around our house. And I guess she had given him some money at that time for him to like get a meal or whatever. So I guess he did call Ed and he came over one afternoon and did some work for Ed. And then that afternoon he left and was never seen again. But Mary Catherine remembers meeting him on the street in this conversation and his voice stuck out to her and she remembered. I don't know.
That's crazy.
She remembers that voice being this man named Emmanuel. But they never saw him again. And I mean, this was probably, I'd say probably almost a year before Elizabeth went missing was when they met this man.
And that's the voice she remembered.
And that's the voice. She remembered it. I don't know. It's weird. Kids are weird. Kids remember the craziest stuff.
They do.
But it baffles the family that Mary Catherine remembers him. So they aren't super convinced. Like they're not doing a whole lot about this because it's just weird. But since they had zero suspects, they didn't want to completely brush it off. So they took this to the police. And the police, like I said, Richard's the guy. So they didn't care about this.
They didn't take it seriously.
They didn't take it seriously. They're like, this little girl remembers a man's name, a homeless guy that they met a year before Elizabeth went missing.
And she thinks that's the person.
Yeah. So they don't entertain it. Now, Ed decides that he's going to produce a sketch from memory of Emmanuel. So he does the sketch, or he has the sketch drawn, and they take it to the police. And once again, the police don't want to publish it because That's not their
They
guy.
they still believe they already caught the guy.
That's not their guy.
So are the police doing anything at this time to find where she is since they think the guy that
I don't know. They might be doing some kind of background, like looking for her, but I don't think they are seriously.
right.
I really don't. But their excuse whenever Ed Smart brought the sketch to them, they're like, we don't want to publish this because if he knows we're onto him, he's going to like go deeper into hiding. So we don't want to publish the sketch. And I honestly think it's because they didn't think that was him.
Yeah.
They thought it was Richard. But that was the excuse that they gave Ed. Now, with the sketch not being published and the police not looking into Emmanuel, the case goes cold again. They celebrate Elizabeth's 15th birthday without her, Christmas without her. I just don't know how you can go on and live a normal life not knowing where your child is. You know, I know that like when you lose a kid,
yeah,
it's really hard to adjust to like holidays and stuff afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's awful, but I just can't imagine not knowing where they are.
Like you don't know, what they're doing.
Yeah. And so at this point, going through all these holidays and birthdays and stuff without her, they're just living in agony. And they expect at any moment, anytime the phone rings, they think it's going to be them finding Elizabeth's dead body somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, that's just what they're thinking. They lost all hope that they'd find her alive. Now, on February 3rd, 2003, 8 months after she disappeared, the Smarts decided to take matters into their own hands and send the sketch that they made out to news sources. So they're like, you know what? If the police don't want to do anything with it, I'm sure the news will. So they send it out in the news. They display it and all that jazz, but it doesn't really get anywhere outside of like the local news.
Yeah.
It doesn't go national. Yeah. Like if this was today, this would be all over TikTok.
Yeah, like we're trying to find
everywhere.
This person. Yeah.
When they release the sketch, they also give descriptions on Emmanuel's, like the way he carried himself and the type of person he was, so that if they didn't recognize him by the picture, they could recognize maybe him by his personality. Yeah. So they said he was soft-spoken, very religious, and was a street creature traveling from place to place.
Street creature.
Now, it didn't go viral and crazy until it was featured on America's Most Wanted. Now, when it was featured on America's Most Wanted, they immediately got a tip from a woman named Lisa, and she was very, very, very confident that she knew who the man was, and it was her brother. And his name was Brian David Mitchell, not Emmanuel. She was very confident it was her brother. When the police do a search on Brian, they see he was arrested 2 times since Elizabeth went missing. One of the times he was arrested was in Salt Lake City, which is where she lived, for shoplifting, and the other in California for breaking into a church. Now, I will say the composite sketch of him looks nothing like him. Nothing like this Brian David Mitchell guy. Doesn't look anything like him. I will post the sketch, and then I will post his actual picture. Doesn't look anything like him. So the sister must have known it by the personality. The sketch showed a man that was clean shaven, wearing like normal clothes, like a polo or something. Yeah. But his profile with the police shows a man that wears robes and has a beard. So he kind of like your Jesus type robes. He wears those. Yeah. With a beard. Like polar opposites of the sketch, which was a little sketchy at first. Yeah. But sources did confirm that he was clean shaven and wore normal clothes for a very short amount of time. And it would have been shortly after the 9/11 attacks, because he said that people were saying he looked like Osama bin Laden with his beard and long hair and the robes and stuff. So he didn't want to look like that because it was dangerous living in
Right.
America looking like Osama bin
Yeah.
Laden right after that. So that would have been the time maybe the Smarts met him, was when he was clean shaven and when he wasn't looking like
Mm-hmm.
that. So the sketch might still be good
Right.
sketch. It's just not how he typically looks.
Right.
He was known in Salt Lake City as the Jesus Man, preaching and asking for money. At the time of this, he had also been seen walking around with two women who wore robes and veils covering everything but their eyes. Now, I will insert a picture right here, and it will show him with a young girl, and she's wearing a veil and a hood, and all you can see are her eyeballs. Now, I will say her eyeballs are very familiar looking. Elizabeth, you can see the picture in the bottom right. She has very prominent eyes, just something about those
Mm-hmm.
eyes. In this picture, those eyes are identical. So that really looks like Elizabeth in that picture. I'm convinced that that's Elizabeth in that picture. So he was hiding her in plain sight, walking her around the streets of Salt Lake City, and the whole town's looking for her. He's just got her covered up, and all you can see are her eyeballs.
Oh my
But like I
gosh.
said, she's got very prominent eyes. I feel like if anybody really looked at her, they'd
Yeah.
know. They would know.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And whenever he introduced people to these two women, he would introduce them as his wife and his daughter.
Hmm.
So now there was a time that someone did recognize Elizabeth by that little small piece of her eyes. They were at a local library. They did call the police, and a detective did come to the library and question her. And
So
said,
someone did recognize her.
yeah, so someone recognized her. The police came and they questioned the little girl with the veil over. And they just very bluntly asked her, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" And the girl under the hood said no, that she was not Elizabeth Smart. Her name is Augustine Marshall. And when the officers suggested that they lift her veil to see what she really looked like underneath there, Brian, Jesus Man, would not allow him to do that because religious purposes. Like, the only people in the world that will ever see this little girl's face is her dad and her future husband. So, no. And there's not really anything that the police can do in that situation because of there's a lot of stipulations when it comes to religion and that stuff. So the detective just had to leave. Even though we think it's her.
So did
I
the
feel like,
detective, you think it was her?
I don't know. I don't think he, honestly, I can't think he cared that much because I don't know what it is with like probable cause and stuff like that and like what the actual stipulations are for things. But I feel like if you held up a picture of Elizabeth Smart and held it next to that little girl, you could tell who she was by the eyeballs. So I feel like that could be enough probable cause to bring her in. And
And I just wonder if the person that got called is actually staring at a picture of, you know what I mean? Or just like, I think they were probably thinking if it's her, she's gonna be like, yeah, save me. And when someone's telling you, like, maybe they're just like, someone just called this and it's not even real, you
yeah.
know?
But I feel like if they looked at a picture of her, you could tell.
Which is sad because they had her maybe right there.
Right there. Right there. Now, so this was a pretty close call. And Brian took his daughter and wife and left Salt Lake City, and they went out to California. Now, another call came in from the tip line from America's Most Wanted. This time it was a woman named Debbie. Debbie claimed to be Brian's second wife. She hadn't seen him in years due to their divorce. I'm thinking they had divorced like 18 years prior, so she hasn't seen him since then. So it's been 18 years since she saw him. She told the police that he was very abusive and evil. Like, during their marriage, he made her life a living hell. And she also mentioned that he had sexually abused her children.
Yikes.
So,
Not a good person.
yeah. And we're knowing he's not, he's sexually abusing children. So, I mean, I like that. That's a good tip. This is someone that has stolen a 14-year-old child.
Yeah.
But she did say he was a molester. However, he was not a killer. So she was confident in that. And she said that if he does have her, she's alive. Like, he won't kill her. He's not, that's not the type. Like, he's a bad person, but he won't kill. So I don't know why she was so confident in that. People change over a span of 18 years.
Right.
But she was confident that he wouldn't kill her because he just was not a killer. Now, on March 12th, 2003, 2 911 calls were made virtually at the same time. So both callers stated that Brian was in Salt Lake City and he had Elizabeth. Because he had been on America's Most Wanted. Everyone knew who they were looking for at this point. And I feel like it probably was out in news aspects too, that it was the Jesus man that they were looking for.
Yeah.
You know. So we know him as a guy without a beard, but we also know him as a guy with beard that walks around in Jesus clothes.
Yeah.
So anyway, when the police came, much to their surprise, Brian and his wife and daughter were now wearing normal clothes. They weren't wearing hoods. They weren't wearing veils or robes or anything like that. They were in t-shirts and jeans, which was weird. I don't know if he thought that they wouldn't recognize them if they were wearing t-shirts and jeans or what. I don't know. But the people absolutely recognized him. They were just walking on the street. 2 people called in at the same time like, yo, this guy's here. And he's got Elizabeth. So Augustine, the daughter, she was wearing a gray colored wig, just like a really cheap costume wig. You know, like it wasn't a good wig. Like they knew it was a wig. Yeah. It was not a good wig. She was also wearing sunglasses so you couldn't see her face. You couldn't see those prominent eyes of hers. Officers immediately respond and approach the group. He asks Brian for his name, and Brian introduces himself as Peter and his wife Juliet and his daughter Augustine Marshall. When the police ask for his ID, Peter says he doesn't have one and doesn't need any worldly possessions because they are messengers of God.
Okay.
So he's got no ID. We can't prove that he's a man named Peter. They then decide to ask Elizabeth who she is, and she tells them that her name is Augustine, their daughter. She's... I don't know. So they ask her to take off her sunglasses, but she refused to do that. She said she had an eye procedure and she can't take them off.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, like she had her eyes dilated or something and she can't take them off. And so this is whenever I'm thinking, okay, this is Stockholm Syndrome. She's just gotten comfortable with her new life and she's just going to stick with it. I don't know. Or maybe she was just scared to death.
Yeah.
She's scared to death. So now they end up separating her away from Brian because they're thinking maybe if they separate them, she won't be afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
And so they keep asking her again who she is. And she says, I know you think I'm that girl who ran away, but I'm not. Like, I know you think I'm Elizabeth Smart, but I'm not Elizabeth Smart. I'm Augustine Marshall. I'm not Elizabeth Smart. Stop asking me that. So the officers obviously aren't buying it.
Well, that's good.
It's just weird how they magically are off of Richard now.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth is visibly very, very nervous. They start talking to her about how her family and everyone misses her and they haven't stopped looking for her. They're kind of guilting her right now. Like, tell us that you're Elizabeth so we can get you back home to your family. Like, your family cares about you. Do not.
Yeah.
Don't just accept this new life.
Yeah.
Tell us who you are.
Right.
And so eventually, after enough prodding, she says the words quoted here, if thou say it. So this Brian guy is very religious. They're probably in some kind of weird, like, culty thing. And he's got her talking in some crazy religious speak.
Yeah.
But the police, they didn't know what she meant by it, but they knew that wasn't a no. Like, they knew that wasn't a denial. So they decided at that moment they were going to take her. So they put her in the squad car, take her to the police. While they're on the way to the police station, they call her dad. Immediately, they call her dad. They say, you need to come to the police station. They don't tell him why. They don't say, hey, we've got Elizabeth. We've got her alive. We've got her dead. Like, they don't say anything. They just say, you need to come. Why can't you tell him?
Right.
Can you imagine, like, what he's thinking in that moment? Like, what am I going to go there to find?
Do you think they knew at that point they had Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think all the prodding and stuff, I think they knew it was Elizabeth. She just had to admit that she was Elizabeth. And I don't know if she thought she was going to get in trouble.
Right. Or what was going through her head.
Yeah, I don't know what she thought was going through her head at that time. When he arrives at the station, he and the family and the community get the news that they've been waiting for. They did identify her. She is Elizabeth, and she's safe and sound. Brian David Mitchell and the adult woman with them were immediately arrested. And the adult woman that was with them was a woman named Wanda Barzee. So that is the story from like the public side of it. This is what the public saw and stuff. Now I'm going to go into Elizabeth's story, like what happened to her while she was gone, and then we'll get into like the trial and everything after that. So a lot of the information I got from Elizabeth's story. So Elizabeth is very outspoken about what happened to her while she was abducted. So she's written books. She's been on podcasts. I will say the information I got was from the Crime Junkie podcast. She did a recording for them. Like they sat down and actually talked with Elizabeth Smart. Awesome. So a lot of this information I got from that podcast. So, and I am just going, you can hear this stuff come out of her mouth specifically. So if this case is like tugging at your heart or something, go listen to the Crime Junkie Elizabeth Smart episode, because you can hear Elizabeth tell the story herself. And it's just wild. I mean, I know a lot of years have passed but it's just wild how she can talk about it and all that. And she's got a good sense of humor on her. Like,
yeah, she didn't let it destroy her.
No. So when Brian came into Elizabeth's room that night, she thought she was dreaming, like this can't be real. But once she came to her senses and realized a man was actually holding a knife to her, she was terrified. She complied as she was scared, She was just scared. And he led her out of the house, through her backyard, cutting through other people's yards. So Elizabeth stated in an interview that he pushed her down into a bush while they were walking through the yards because she saw a cop car drive by. So he pushed her in the bush, get down. I don't want the cop to see you here. Which makes me wonder, because Mary Catherine immediately went downstairs and woke up her parents immediately.
Because she was awake.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder if that's a police officer responding.
Yeah, on his way.
On his way to their house. And he drove past them. That's crazy. That's one reason you have to work so fast at this stuff. They were on foot.
Yeah.
If they started immediately getting on foot, they may have been able to catch up or whatever. So Brian ended up leading her up into the mountains behind her home. She said they walked for hours trekking through the mountains. She said she lost track of time. She doesn't know. They could have been walking for 45 minutes. They could have been walking for 6 hours.
Yeah.
She said she was just so scared that she lost track of all time. He told her that his wife was waiting for them, and her sweet innocence at the time, 14 years old, she thought, maybe him and his wife lost a child and they just wanted a new one, or maybe they were never able to have a child and so they just wanted her. That's what she was thinking, was that they wanted a child and that they took her for that. Now, unfortunately, this was not the case. It was not sweet, innocent butterflies and rainbows as to why they wanted to abduct her. Now, Brian Mitchell believed he was a prophet named Emmanuel. This is the name that Mary Catherine remembers. This is how he introduced himself to the family.
Which is crazy that her sister's the reason why she was found.
Yeah. It's crazy. A half asleep, like 9-year-old. He also desired to live a polygamous lifestyle. When arriving to the campsite, Wanda greeted Elizabeth with a kiss and pulled her into a tent where she undressed her and gave her a sponge bath. So immediately, as soon as Elizabeth gets there, she's taking her clothes off and giving her a bath. Weird. Very weird. And then they had some kind of a really bizarre sealing ceremony, is what they called it. And it was like a little wedding ceremony, is what it was. He was now married to Elizabeth.
Oh, good Lord.
In the eyes of God, he was married to Elizabeth. So he declared Elizabeth his wife, and then he raped her. She does go into that and like how she was feeling during that. So if you really want to listen to her version, it's great. Go over and listen to it. It's incredible. Now, Elizabeth was very, very religious growing up. So after she was raped, she said in this interview that she was afraid her parents like wouldn't want her anymore because she was no longer a virgin.
That's so sad. That
is so sad. And she even mentioned in this that she was 1 out of 6 kids. That's a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. You know, so she's like, well, I'm gone. That leaves my parents with 5 kids. That's still a lot of kids. Like, they'll be fine without me. So I think that's
heartbreaking.
Yeah. I think that's one reason why she kind of accepted her new life, because she's like, my parents won't want me because I'm not a virgin.
Oh my gosh.
And heartbreaking. And she thinks that just because her parents have a large family that
right,
she wouldn't be missed. It's so sad, like the thoughts that go through your mind when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. So Brian and Wanda kept Elizabeth captive for months. What was it? I think at the end it was like 9 months that she was gone.
Yeah.
Now during this time, Brian raped Elizabeth on a daily basis and kept her tied to a tree most of the time. That's not how you should treat your wife, by the way. She's your wife now, Brian. In the eyes of God, right. I don't think he wants you having her tied to a tree.
You wouldn't think so.
Well, anyway, there was one time in this interview that Elizabeth said when they were searching the mountains, like the police search, they got very, very close to that campsite. They didn't quite get there, but apparently they were so close that they could hear them. So they were very close to finding her, and they didn't.
That's awful.
He forced her to consume a lot of alcohol and drugs. Like he would just make her be drunk all the time or high off something all the time, incoherent. And they were known to starve her for days at a time. Sometimes he'd let her get to the brink of starvation before he gave in and gave her food. And there was another part in an interview that was another one of those like thoughts that a child thinks of, and it's so sad. But she said in the interview that she was upset that he was making her take drugs because it was against, she made like that dare pledge in school to not do drugs, and she was breaking that.
Oh my gosh.
That's what she was thinking about. Like, I'm breaking my pledge.
That's crazy. That's what was going through her mind.
I know. Poor thing. Poor thing. During this time, he was also trying to indoctrinate Elizabeth in all his crazy religious beliefs and convince her that he was a prophet, and she was lucky to be one of his wives. And they did confirm that they were the ones that tried abducting Elizabeth's cousin, Jessica. So it was related. Stupid police officers.
Did they say why they wanted to get someone else, like her family member?
Oh, well, I mean,
did they?
I may say this later, but he wanted to be a polygamist, and he wanted to be
multiple wives.
He wanted multiple wives, and I just think I I think it just happened to be a coincidence that it was her cousin. But she was a 14-year-old. He wanted young girls like that. I don't know. Maybe he had worked on their house too. Or maybe he had talked to Elizabeth and Elizabeth gave him information. I don't know specifically, but he wanted like 400 wives or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Some people run like a pet sanctuary. He's running a wife sanctuary, tying them to trees and crap. In the interview, she also mentions the day in the library that someone recognized her and the detective came to talk to her. She was afraid to say anything. She was afraid she'd be killed or someone else would be killed at her expense. I guess that was something that he threatened her a lot, was that if you say something, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to kill someone else and make you watch, and you're going to be responsible for that person's death. She was scared to death of that she would say something, he'd kill the police officer or whoever it was, and then she'd be responsible for that person dying.
Oh my gosh.
So she was like taking the sacrifice. She was like,
that's heartbreaking.
I'm just going to do this, and this is just how my life is now. In September of 2002, they moved to the San Diego area, bouncing between different campsites and homeless shelters. They had another failed attempt of kidnapping a girl in the San Diego area. After this failed attempt, Brian Mitchell tried moving the family to the east side of the country, like New York, New Jersey, somewhere in that area. But Elizabeth Smart was pretty smart. She decided that she was going to have an epiphany from God. She was going to have this God moment. She was smart. She knew that God spoke to Emmanuel and all these things happened because of what God was willing him to do. You know, he took Elizabeth because God told him to do that. So Elizabeth decided to do a little bit of reverse psychology. And she said, Emmanuel, I know I'm not worthy of this, but I just know God spoke to me. She's like, I know I'm not worthy of this, but I just know he did. And Emmanuel's like, oh my God, what did God say to you? And she was like, God spoke to me and told me that we needed to go back to Salt Lake City, where she was from.
Where everyone could recognize
her. And he was like, okay. If God said we needed to do that, then I guess we're going back there. So they pack up and they go back to Salt Lake City. And at this point is whenever he was all over America's Most Wanted. And he's going back to the city he abducted. He's a dumbass.
Yeah.
He was blinded by this sense of God in his mind.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, probably day one that they're back in Salt Lake City. They are walking the streets in normal clothes. Maybe God told them to do that too. I don't know. But people recognized him and Elizabeth right away. And so that happened. Now, that was her time of being abducted. There's definitely some more stuff in there that you'll get from her. But it was just a lot of crazy religious stuff, a lot of sexual abuse, starvation, living in the woods, just awful. That was her time there. But like I said, Brian and Wanda were like immediately arrested. It was not until March 5th of 2008 that Brian and Wanda were indicted on the charges of kidnapping. So this all happened in she went missing in 2002, so she would have been found in 2003. 5 years later, they're not even indicted. I guess they weren't considered like mentally sane enough to stand trial because of all this religious stuff. So they were being probably held in like a mental hospital or something. Not until they were deemed fit to stand trial were they indicted on these charges. So that was 5 years.
Okay. That's silly.
Yeah. Now, Wanda decided to plead guilty, and she said, in quotes, I am so sorry, Elizabeth, for all the pain and suffering I caused you and your family. It is my hope you will be able to find it in your heart to forgive me. On March 1st, 2010, so now we're 7 years after, Brian was finally deemed competent for trial. So finally, he was indicted and then finally deemed competent in 2010. On May 21st, 2010, Wanda received a sentence of 15 years of kidnapping and sexual assault. Now, Elizabeth's mother said, "What you did to our family and our girl Elizabeth was wrong. It was wrong and it was evil. You hurt our family in ways you'll never know." And, she can be sorry all she wants, but Elizabeth says she is just as evil as him. This woman sat and she watched this man rape a 14-year-old child.
It was,
Hundreds of times. Yeah, hundreds.
Getting her ready for it. Hundreds of times. Yeah, you're just as bad.
Just as bad. So Elizabeth, the whole time, always thinks that she's just as bad. So Brian's trial started November 1st, 2010. He was going to plead not guilty for reasons of insanity. So, he truly was a freaking psycho. Yeah. I don't like when anybody gets the insanity plea because, come on. But, I guess if anybody's insane, this guy is freaking insane. Mm-hmm. He's a psycho. But whatever. There's a lot of people. I'm like, if they can do this to another human, they've got to be insane, right?
You would think, yeah.
At the time of his trial, Elizabeth was 23 years old. So she sat on the stand for 3 days to tell her story. Gosh. Yeah. She explains a situation in which she was in the library, saw the police, and wanted to ask for help, but was too afraid. I don't even need to add that in there. Just ignore that.
That's a long time to get justice. From the time when she was to then taking the stand at 23.
Yeah. She was 14, took the stand at 23. That's a long time.
I just can't imagine the mindset of that whole time frame, having to know you're going to, you know what I mean? That's a lot of stress and stuff to put on. She's still a kid in my mind.
Can you imagine what you do with your life after that? After she came home? What do you do?
Right. And then
do you just go back to being a normal 15-year-old kid?
And then to know they're not even convicted of anything yet. You still got to go and face them again.
It's just wild. Mm-hmm. So after Elizabeth was on the stand for 3 days, Wanda got on the stand and testified against Brian. This was part of her plea deal. They said, okay, part of your plea deal is you're going to get on the stand. You're going to tell us everything. She explained a quote-unquote revelation that drove Brian's desire to abduct girls until he had 350 wives. What are you going to do with that many people?
But he couldn't even get past the one, right?
Yeah. He got one girl. 2 others were failed, and then the other girl got found. This guy was bad at it, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know if he wanted... Do you remember that? I can't remember what it's called, so forgive me. But it was a cult that all committed suicide. I want to talk about this cult at some point.
No,
You don't know about this one?
I've never even heard of that. How many people were there?
A lot. I think thousands. They all committed suicide together.
Oh my gosh. What'd they do? Did they take something or?
Yeah, they drank a juice that was poisoned.
And they all knew it was.
Yeah, and they drank it together. Well, I think they all knew about it. I could be wrong. Yeah, I'll get into that one at some point.
The cult leader say drink it, and they just all
drank it. That might have been what it was, actually. The cult leader, I think, killed them all in a mass suicide. I don't know.
There was one I wanted to do.
I will cover
about it's a lake somewhere, like a man-made lake that has had have you heard of this? It has had an astronomical amount of deaths, beyond the normal death rate when it comes to accidents, drowning. The numbers are insane. And this man-made lake was built over an all-black town that everyone got killed. And they built the lake on top of the town. And we're talking 60-foot trees and stuff. And they this town had cemeteries in it. and it was an all like black community that, and the amount of deaths now that have happened that, and I mean, this was a long time ago when they killed everyone in the town and put the lake in, but there's a whole town underneath this lake that people go to and swim in, but the death count and stuff that happens there is bizarre.
It's like a haunted lake. And
Yeah.
people are just dying.
And people say don't. They're like, don't go swimming in. But I mean, they've made it like almost like an amusement park style lake, but there's a town underneath it with cemeteries
Ew.
and like street signs. Like they legit just put in this on top of a town.
What in the world?
You'll have to look. It's all over TikTok. I was like, that'd be
Oh
a
my
good
gosh.
one to do an episode on.
Yeah, we'll do.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah. That is. That's wild.
And for it to have so many like accidental and it's weird.
That is creepy.
Mm-hmm. Off topic, sorry.
No, you're good. Let's get back. You're good. We both got off topic. Like I said, I don't know if he was trying to build something as big as that one
Right.
cult that I had mentioned, then we got off topic. So I don't know what he was trying to do here, but he was trying to be this massive cult leader. He had dreams of this. The jury rejected his insanity claim and found him guilty of kidnapping and unlawful transportation of a minor across state lines for sexual activity. So I guess in the courtroom when he was found guilty, Elizabeth was visibly very thrilled. I think over this amount of time she's recovered, she's
Yeah.
gotten stronger about it. You know, I don't think she's upset about it. Like she's upset, but
Right.
you know, I don't, yeah. So she was very happy and she let it be known. So while awaiting sentencing, Elizabeth launched the Elizabeth Smart Foundation to combat sexual violence. She also confronted Brian and said, in quotes, "I know that you know what you did was wrong. You took away 9 months of my life that can never be returned, but in this life or next, you will have to be held responsible for those actions, and I hope you are ready for when that time comes." And on May 25th, 2011, Brian was sentenced to life in prison. And like, I love it. I love that he's in prison for the rest of his life. I absolutely love that. He deserves it. However, I don't understand the sentencing in this country because people can murder people and get 5 years.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy. And then what'd you say Wanda got? How much did she get?
She got 15 years. And I don't think she spent 15 years.
Right.
But I'm saying that I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in prison forever, because I do absolutely think he deserves to be in prison the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But so do people that kill people.
Mm-hmm.
These girls
Right.
that tortured Shanda Scherer should all be in prison for the rest of their lives.
And they're out.
Freaking what's her face that tortured Sylvia Likens was out in like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
She was the most evil person I've ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm.
20 years. What?
Yeah.
I'm amazed.
That's wild.
I feel like we need to have a standard here, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Why? So anyway, Elizabeth, to this day, she thrives and is a known advocate that is dedicating her life to helping educate and help other victims. She has since gotten married and published a memoir called My Story, and a second book eventually followed called Where There's Hope, Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. So like I said, she's told her story thousands of times. You know, she's very open about it. And so if this story did touch your heart, I really encourage you to find her books, read those, find interviews with her. There's like movies about it, I believe. You know, I encourage you to go out and get more, because I just scratched the surface. I did not give this near as much as there is, because I can't do it as well as Elizabeth does it, so I'm not going to try.
I'm sure hearing it in her own words.
When the victim themselves tells the story, it's 100% better than anything anybody else can give you. unfortunately, we can't always give you a happy ending where the person survived and is thriving and all of that. Then we have to tell the stories of them. But listen to her story, because I didn't even want to try to do too much, because she does it 1,000 times better than I do. And on September 19th, 2018, Wanda was released from prison under the conditions that she register as a sex offender and that she has to participate in a mental health treatment program. Now, like I said, Elizabeth wasn't super jazzed about that, because she thinks that she is 100% on the same level as Brian, because she sat and watched all of this and let it happen to her. But yeah, that is Elizabeth's story. Like I said, I encourage you to go out and listen to more, because it is an awesome story. And you've probably heard of her name before, at least, if you didn't know the story.
I had heard of the name, but I did not know like the deep dive into it. Yeah. I think since it happened so long, I mean, I remember hearing it back then in the news, but not really knowing everything about it.
Yeah, I had definitely heard about it. The reason I got into this case was because I was trying to think of something. I will tell you, when it comes to having a podcast like this, the hardest part of this podcast is choosing what to do next.
And making sure there's enough information about the case you want to do.
So I'm like tasking my mom, just tell me what case I'm going to do next. Yeah. Because I will sit there for 4 hours.
Trying to pick one.
And I have such a hard time picking one.
Well, I've started them before, and then I'm like, there's just not enough here.
I've done that too. I'm like I really want to do this
an hour into it. I'm like, I can't, never mind. I got to go back to the drawing board.
There's not enough here. Yeah. I'll do like a quick scan, and if I'm not finding much, I'm like, okay. Yeah, but so it's hard to pick, because I'm like, oh, that's good. That one doesn't have enough, but I really want to do that. I'd love to stay local to us as well. Yeah. But I feel like we've already covered every case that has a lot of information on it. The other stuff, it would take a lot of research. Yeah. But yeah, I got onto this one because I was looking up cases that were related to Stockholm Syndrome, because I wanted to bring Stockholm Syndrome up. If you don't know what Stockholm Syndrome is, it's whenever you develop feelings for your captor. Yeah. That's what Stockholm Syndrome is. So I was looking up different cases that did that, and I thought I wanted to do something different, because I've done such brutal stuff. This is brutal, but at least she survived it and she's thriving. That's a nice ending to that, because the Shanda Scherer and Darlie Rudier and Sylvia Likens, I'm just like, I'm over all the... Yeah. Anyway, so that is all I have for Elizabeth Smart. Next week, we are going to be getting with another podcast to do a collab. I'm excited.
We're so excited.
I'm so excited. Let me tell you the backstory here. So Whitney and I, when we first started like talking about our podcast, looking into podcast names, we ran across a podcast called Cousins on Crime. We're cousins talk crime, they're cousins on crime. We thought their profile picture was super cute, because they're sitting on like a couch and they're like little toddlers. They're adorable. And so immediately we were like, oh, mom, dad, like we were both to our parents, like, can you find a cute picture of us when we were kids? And no, we don't have any cute ones when we were kids. Not of us like sitting together. Yeah. It's either got like the whole fam group, in it or whatever. So then we ended up going with our current logo, which is fine, but which is probably good. We didn't find one, because I wouldn't want to completely copycat the other girls, but their idea was super cute. Well, anyway, you need to go find their podcast, Cousins on Crime. They're very good. And yeah, they're awesome. So we immediately started like talking to them when our podcast started. And we decided to do a collab together. And we're going to be recording that next week. And we're going to do 2 episodes, where one episode is their story and it'll be featured on their podcast. And then one episode will be like our story, and it'll be featured on our podcast. But yeah, if you need a new podcast to listen to, go over to Cousins on Crime and give them a listen, because they've got some pretty good ones.
Yeah.
I was binging them a couple weeks ago, listening.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing Power Wash Simulator on my Xbox, and I was just listening and power washing.
No, yeah, I remember when we were coming up, we couldn't. It took us a while to pick a name.
It did. We had so many names
We
for
would
our
go
podcast.
through, a list. And we just decided, I feel like, on this, like a simple one.
A simple one, yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of getting too
Crazy
into it. But yeah, it was. Picking a name was hard. I think that was the hardest thing we've done so far, was deciding a name.
Mm-hmm. Because you want the perfect name.
You do. You want the perfect name. And it's just, I don't think we ever found the perfect name.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the name that was suggested first thing. I think your mom suggested it, was Cousins Talk Crime. Like back when we were at the euchre table, very first time we were ever talking about it. So, yeah. But that's that. And yeah, we'll catch you next week with our friends, Elena and Candace, with Cousins on Crime. Have a good one, and we'll catch you there.
Bye.
Bye.